This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. It's 6:30. We do have a quorum present. All members of the Planning Commission are present. The usual microphone reminder, please be sure your microphones are on if you have comments to make. We do need to adopt the agenda unless there's some change or correction.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to add one announcement to the agenda when you're ready.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and do that now then.
All right, just a quick reminder to all of our planning commissioners. Everyone except for Jim Smith, who has already completed these tasks, needs to see Kim about doing their mandatory disclosures. We have 2 planning commissioners that have 2 disclosures to complete before we get to February. So if you would kindly go ahead and follow up with Kim and get those done, you'll take the worry away from her in getting those filed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Any other? Yes.
Move to adopt the agenda.
Motion's been made and seconded to adopt the agenda, including the reminder from Mr. Nichols. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Any preliminary public comment before we begin? All right, if not, our new business includes the election of officers. So, Mr. Wright, would you kind of handle this for the beginning for us, please?
It's on. When it's green. Is it on? There you go.
All right. So,
It's on.
first thing we need to do is elect a president. Is there any discussion about that?
We have nominating committee. Nominating committee has
Oh,
nominations.
does the nominating committee have a nomination for president?
We do. The nomination committee met this past Friday, January 10th. And I'd like to make a motion to elect Stephen Carpenter as chairman of the Planning Commission.
So we have a nomination for Mr. Carpenter to be chairman.
Yes, sir.
Is there any second to that nomination?
Second.
Perfect. Any discussion?
Any further nominations?
And are there any further nominations? Hearing none. I think it's time we have a vote on Mr. Carpenter. All those in favor? All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, I believe that's a 7-0.
Okay.
Congratulations, Mr.
Thank
President.
you, sir. Or condolences, as the case may be. All right. We also need to elect the vice chairman. Nathan, you have a nomination for that?
Yeah, we'd like to elect Pete Elliott as vice chairman.
Okay. Any further nominations? Any discussion on the nomination?
I second Pete.
Okay. All right, if there's no further discussion, no further nominations, all in favor of Pete Elliott for vice chairman, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. Let's see. Ms. Henshaw, are you willing to continue as a secretary? Okay. So you want to propose that? Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Janet Henshaw as secretary of the Planning Commission.
Any further nominations? Anybody willing to volunteer? Okay. Any discussion?
I second the nomination for Janet Henshaw for secretary.
Okay. In that case, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. You have won your election. All right, thank you, guys. We also need to adopt our bylaws. I don't think, we just did this, I think, last year. Jim did a thorough review of those. Is there any discussion or anything that you would like to change in the bylaws this year? I guess it's been handed back over since I took over, so, okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we continue with the bylaws that we have in place.
Second?
All right, the motion's been made and seconded to adopt the bylaws as they stand now. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, very good, thank you. We do need to adopt the minutes from January 8th. I did notice one minor thing that we need to correct at the very, very end, there was a sentence about Samantha Gary commenting, that should have been back with the discussion on the Kriegersville School. So I think that occurred prior to that point in the discussion. Any other comments or questions or changes on the minutes?
She did comment at the end, yes, sir.
Okay,
That's why I
thank you.
stuck it there.
All right,
I didn't know
I
if that was
stand
the correct
corrected then.
place, but
Move to submit the minutes as presented.
Second?
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. All in favor of submitting the minutes as submitted, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you, very well. First case for the evening is case number SU-12-01. Amanda Hoffner, Quietude Dog Boarding. This is the second workshop on this. Ms. Amanda Hoffner has applied for a special use permit to operate a dog boarding kennel on her property located at 227 Jack's Shop Road and further identified as Madison County Tax Map Parcel 62-9L. The subject parcel is 30.268 acres and is zoned A1. The applicant has proposed modifying existing buildings to meet the needs of her business. Currently, no new buildings are proposed. Okay, Alan, anything to add there?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Since our previous workshop on this one, we have had some feedback from the public. The public feedback is included in the staff report, and I think the questions are reasonable to be discussed this evening. There were 4 key items, and they referenced a previous special use permit for Hart, the big kennel up on the northern end of the county. I've included the special use permit for Hart for your reference. It's also in the packet. And we probably should talk a little bit more tonight about whether we would like to impose any more conditions on the applicant for this permit. So far, our discussions for conditions have been limited to 25 dogs as a maximum capacity. So beyond that, I'll turn it back to the Planning Commission for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Nichols? Yes.
One, it's probably for council though, if that's okay. And in our zoning, the definition of a kennel is a place designed or prepared to house, brood, breed, handle, or otherwise keep or care for dogs or cats for sale or in return for compensation. And home litters kept less than 6 months are not included. So am I correct in reading that because a kennel is a place and not an activity unless it's for compensation? So if it's in for compensation, then am I safe in assuming that that means that Code of Virginia sections dealing with animal welfare come into place? And I don't want to hit you flat-footed on that. I've got them here. That's not my style, as you know, unless you're not a friend.
All right, so you're handing me the code provision on, at section 3.2-6503.
Yeah, that's the, from the Code of Virginia. And care for companion animals is, I think, what we are looking at here. It seems to bring a plethora of regulations and other definitions and requirements into play.
Yeah, so we have our own definition of kennel, which is going to be,
Which is what I just read, I think.
right, And so it's okay that the code has a different one than what we have in terms of our zoning ordinance. But what is your,
My question is.
yeah,
if-
sorry.
If you are operating a kennel under our zoning.
Yep.
And our code.
Mhm.
Then, and there are no other regulations regarding companion animals, and that's what you're doing. But since you're operating a kennel for compensation, does that then place it under the jurisdiction of the state law regarding operating kennels for compensation? And I know that we required certain aspects of that to be dealt with because the state veterinarian can inspect at will.
Sure. And then, Mr. Cave can go and inspect anybody when there's a complaint and.
That's right. And I think we made specific reference to it at heart, but I'm wondering whether or not we should incorporate reference if we go forward with allowing this.
Can you remind me what the reference was with Hart? Okay, was it
I'll
one of
find
the
it.
conditions?
Yes, it was in one of the conditions.
Okay.
Condition 3. So it's not a specific
Comply with-
condition, it's just comply with the regulations or requirements as promulgated by the Department of Agriculture. I would assume that if you're going to have requirements and regulations, you would also pay some deference to the code.
Sure. I'd also welcome that, if we can, or at some point, welcome the applicants, I guess, understanding of their obligation with regard to,
Under state law.
yeah, but. Are you required to get a permit? Okay.
Any
Do you
further
get
questions?
inspected by anybody from the state? Okay. We'd be learning together. I'd be happy to look into this before our next meeting on it, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, any further questions for staff? Either Mr.
I'll
Nichols
interject
or
that I'm
Mr.
happy to have a conversation with our animal control officer on the matter as well and provide more feedback when we meet later. So I can talk to Greg about it.
Okay.
And I apologize for the late hour on bringing that up, but it just came to me at the
It's what we're here for.
research later this afternoon. So.
I had a similar comment on here. I had questioned, my comment on that number 3 was how stringent was that Bait Act is going to be for a smaller business? I didn't know, so I had questioned the same thing.
7 animals and it's.
Yeah.
Chairman, I guess I got 2 questions. So who is gonna monitor the disposal of feces and urine? Is that gonna be the health department, DDQ, what's gonna happen there?
Mr. Elliott, we did have this conversation in my office with Mr. Cave. In PDRC, it was brought up, Emily said that the health department does not do any regulation of animal waste. Mr. Cave said that the operation was of such a small scale that he did not feel that any extra steps were necessary. It was the same as letting your dog out in the yard or less than having a horse in your pasture, essentially. So it wasn't anything that he was terribly concerned with. So those were the comments that I got from the 2 individuals I spoke to on the matter.
Okay, I guess the next question I got, Steve, I guess it's for the applicant, but isn't all this land in land use?
Okay, if you would, go ahead and come to the microphone or, okay.
The land is currently in land use, yes.
So the portion that you're doing with this kennel will be a business and you'll be taking that out of land use?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Since we have questions for the applicant, any further questions for the applicant? Mike?
This isn't a question for the applicant, I would just like to make comment. I called Ms. Hoffner earlier today and asked if I could do my personal site visit, or for anybody else that wanted to, and she was nice enough to give me a little tour. And I would like to say that, so this picture that we have here doesn't quite depict what is actually going on there. And I would like to say that, so the picture that we have of the kennel itself there, that really, there's more to it than that, which I think is in a good way, because what we don't see here is this is just the outside of the runs. There's a wall that goes, so these six or seven. So these 6 run-ins have a wall about, I'd say, 7, 8 feet inside of that, with a continuous wall that was the outside of the barn. That also has basically a door for the animals to travel back and forth to an inside area so that they can be let in and let out. Because one of my comments on here was, what would you do with barking dogs or such? Would there be a noise barrier? So she does have a noise barrier. So if there was barking dogs or whatever, she could actually bring them in, let the door back down, and then the dog would be confined inside of what she calls the shop area, which is a larger area on the inside. So I just wanted to say that there is more to this than what we're seeing, that there is a noise barrier. And we're only, because I had questions on what I was looking at here in this pictures. I mean, if there was a dog out there barking around, you could certainly hear it very easily, but she can confine the dogs to an inside area. So I just wanted to bring that out, that's what I saw there.
It's a good point, that noise abatement is available on the site, yes.
And there is a fenced-in, you can barely see the fenced-in area. There's another area, if you look to the left-hand side of the bottom of that picture, there is a fenced-in area, runabout play area, I guess, that they, because you really don't see that in this picture here. You just see a fence maybe going straight down about, once again, maybe 8 feet from where the run-ins are, but they can go outside of that to an outside area as well.
To add to that, the area under that lean-to is kind of like a channel. You can let them out the door and then let them go down the channel. I have 2 separate lots. I can pick one of the 2 to put the dog out in. That allows me to let 2 different kennels out, one in each lot, so that I don't have to put the dogs together.
Are those, can you kind of describe the fencing, the security arrangements on those 2 paddock areas?
It's horse woven wire, so it's, what is that, 1.5 inch by 4 inch rectangles. So it's very secure with a top board and a bottom board, all oak.
Okay, so we're looking at least 4 feet, then,
Yeah,
since it's a
4
horse, yeah. Any other question for the applicant?
I don't for the applicant, but I do have a sort of a question and comment for Mr. Nichols. We're ready for that. Mr. Nichols, you have mentioned that during the PDRC review, Mr. Cave, I'm assuming, the animal control, had stated that with the given number of dogs boarding there, it wasn't really a concern as far as waste disposal.
I spoke to Mr. Cave in my office. The health department I spoke to in PDRC, so you won't find minutes from Mr. Cave, or
Gotcha.
Mr. Cave included in the minutes.
Sure.
But that was his commentary, was that the operation was so small. He said, whether you brush it out into the pasture, it was such a small amount that it wasn't, he did not see it as any concern at all.
Sure, yeah.
I don't know what the line in the sand is, so to speak, as to when that becomes, the need to be regulated.
And to me, that's really the only thing that needs to be clear, just as far as like is everything, with current licenses or anything. But I also saw during the PDRC comments here in the paperwork that the applicant stated that she would have up to 12 animals at a time for boarding, and the SUP is for 25. So I don't know what the number was when you and Mr. Cave spoke.
I don't want to speak on behalf of Ms. Hofter. She can speak for herself, but I believe that came from at PDRC. That's where she's currently operating, what her current capacity is. And the number of 25 came as a proposed upper threshold, a limit. To be fair, I do think that when Mr. Cave and I had talked, that we were talking based on the PDRC numbers, which was 12. So I'm going to talk to Greg anyway about a permit required from any other agency. And I'll also mention the maximum number of dogs, if that needs to be reduced, or where the line in the sand is for when you would need some other regulation. So we'll see if we can get to the bottom of that before we get to public hearing.
Sure, I appreciate that, and I mean, you absolutely, you want to give yourself room to grow your business and not turn business away. I understand that entirely, but to me, I mean, there's really only a couple concerns, and that's noise, which I don't think's too much of a concern, and then obviously just the health and safety of your neighbors from proper disposal, whatever should be disposed of, and so that's it. Thank you, Mr. Nichols.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one question for the applicant. You've actually had animals on the property for a while now?
I have my own animals, and then I did the boarding until I got the letter, and then I haven't been boarding since then.
In that time that you did you have any incidents where there were animal attacks to neighboring?
No.
I'm very fond of chickens, so I understand this.
I have chickens.
Okay.
I love my chickens, so no.
No incidents of
No.
that? And then, have you talked to Farm Bureau, whoever your insurance carrier is, about damage to livestock? Is there a special proffer for that or anything that you need for
I
insurance?
hadn't looked into that aspect of it for like neighbors, but as far as people boarding, I have coverage for their dogs.
Okay.
So.
Maybe a recommendation was just to make sure that the insurance does cover, I'm assuming that it would,
Absolutely.
any loss to neighboring property.
Yeah.
But since it has been brought up in
That'd
public
be a
comment, I
very
probably
good
would.
idea.
And the second one I actually do have, and it sounds like we'll probably get more legal direction from this, from Alan, but whenever you were boarding, what was the waste pickup procedure? Was it every day or baggies? Was it a big trash can?
It's typically easiest to do it right after they
Mhm.
go out, because I don't leave them alone out there. I stay with them. So it's easiest just to go get it when you see it happen, because the lots they aren't small. They're about 40 by 60 each at least. So it's kind of
Mhm.
a lot of walking if you don't stand there and just go get it.
And
So it's easiest just to
incineration
pick it
now,
up.
or is it compost pile? What
The-
are you doing with
The
it? Just-
dump, I actually talked to Mr. Cave myself. So the shelter takes it to the dump, and the dump, I called them. They said that they do allow it, so
Okay.
I take it there.
So you did have a plan and process.
Mhm. Yeah. I don't want it there either. And it's bad for cows, and I have cows, so, yeah.
Perfect.
All
That's
right.
all the question I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mike, you have.
One last thing. So as it is right now, you've got the 6 spaces. Would that allow at this point, would that be for 12 at this point? Would
Yes.
you allow 2, say if somebody brought something in, would you allow, I want my 2 dogs together, would you
Yes.
possibly put 2 in each? I'm
Yes.
gonna call them run-ins because I'm a horse guy, but, so I'm gonna call them a run-in. And then if you were to expand, you mentioned that you would go on the opposite side of the shop and build the other ones over on the other side. So that would probably be your 24, 25-ish then?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was just easier to say 25, because I think the numbers were kind of 50 and 25 is what we were talking
Sure.
about at the last meeting, so we
So,
just
but
went with 25.
you're not really looking at building another building or anything like that? You just want
No.
to use the space that you have and two dogs preferably, and no more than that in each run-in?
Yeah,
and-
I mean, it might balance out where there's like 3 Chihuahuas or something that want to stay together, because to take one away from 2 that they're bonded with would be difficult, but it would balance out where I wouldn't have any in one kennel, or I'd have one in several kennels, so.
And you acknowledged earlier today that you would be condescending on barking dogs for neighbors and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really don't want to hear it either. My house is probably the closest of everyone's, so, yeah, they're typically not welcome back. And if you do want to bring them back, then we would have a bark collar in place.
You mentioned barking collars.
And if I couldn't get a hold of the people to come and get the dogs. I would contain them as best I could to keep them quiet. And then I would let the dog know, the owners know to come and get them as soon as they could. But, yeah. They don't want to hear it either. It's respect to everyone for that, so.
Okay, I'm kind of following up on one of Mike's comments. Right now, with what you're planning, the modifications of the stalls, you plan on being able to house at least 12. And then you say what would your expansion plans look like? That's what I want to ask.
So
Is it the same building or?
it's the same building. There's an 11-stall horse barn.
Okay, so there's
That's at
stalls
that end.
on the other side of the aisle.
Right.
Okay.
No, it's at the other end of the barn.
Mhm.
And then the 60 feet of the barn that the kennels are in is more of a garage.
Okay,
So it's an open, pretty much square, maybe a rectangle, give or take. I think it's 60 by 60. But they run down one side, and then there's a garage door in the middle, and then the other side has nothing. It's just kind of a workshop area, some tools and stuff. But I would put them on this side. So it would be 6 kennels on this side, just the same as in the picture. That's what it is. And then on the other side of the shop area. And then the rest of the barn is all stalls for our farm animals and such.
okay, so any expansion potential would be still within the same basic building? It would
Yes.
just be further down? Okay,
It'd just be right across the aisle from it, yes.
thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, if not, is there any public comment at this time? Yes, sir, if you would. Identify yourself, and we'll go from there.
Austin Griffin, I'm a adjoining neighbor. My wife and I, Casey, adjoining neighbor. Yeah, we're not against someone starting a business, certainly. We just do want, I'll let her speak after me because there's some questions. We're assuming she had, what, 6, how many dogs did you have in your previous attempt? Yeah, before you got the permit, when you sent the letter, you were boarding dogs. How many did you have? At one time? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if you would, sir, address your comments to the planning commission. Let's not
Yeah, I
do
just didn't
question
know
and
what her
answers.
number was,
Yeah.
based on my comments, where the noise was an issue. I know Nathan mentioned that the noise is not an issue, but in her previous attempt, that was our main issue. I mean, there's emails and texts flowing of, are you hearing this between neighbors? I do recall trying to go to bed at night and hearing it. I can't tell you what time it was. But the noise disturbance was an issue. And, so then the committee brought forth maxing it out to 25, and, that's why I asked the first question. I know in her first attempt that she didn't have a whole lot of dogs, but I guess it only takes one dog to cause a noise issue. And we were very encouraged. I mean, we're not trying to stop her, but we were encouraged by the Hart SUP where you attached conditions to the noise. And all we were hoping at this point was that you would consider that in this SUP, if you approved it, that you would attach similar language. I believe it was 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. The dog would be inside, and that's really what we're, the noise was the first and major issue that we had as neighbors. There have been other issues mentioned about the facility. The height of the fences and the structure itself, and again, don't mean to direct it to her, but I was understanding there was a dog that was loose in her previous attempt as well. So we weren't sure if the structure was going to be amended, or if these dogs were required to have shots. We bring our dogs to kennels, and we have to prove the paperwork, and their shots are up to date. That's all we're asking. I mean, we're not really here to try to block anything other than make sure it's done right. So the noise, the structure, that the shots are required, the dog shots are up to date. We have animals, we have chickens, we have other dogs, we have small children, you name it. And we just heard last week that there was a dog loose. I don't know if that's true or not. when she tried to, before this, and it was for several hours. So, you know, we're just trying to address these concerns. And I know that you guys, you weren't maybe possibly aware of those details.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other public comment on this case? Any other public comment?
Richard Wernick, we're at 11 Sunny Pond Lane. We don't adjoin the property, but we're directly across facing the barn. And our issue is basically the same. It's the noise. Previously, I don't know when it was, in the spring or summer when she had the dog, it was all day long, barking away. That's, you know, changes our quality of life, why we moved to the country. It wasn't to hear, you know, noise all day long. And to take that a step further, it will devalue the property in the event we want to sell. If, you know, one of these homeowners wants to sell. So it is a noise issue, and one question I have is, how would it be enforced? What, can't call the sheriff every time there's a barking dog. I think it, in my opinion, it's a little unrealistic to think that every time a dog starts barking away, it's going to be brought inside. That's my opinion. So I can kind of foresee problems, quite frankly. Dogs set off dogs. We've got a number of dogs in the area now. The Griffins have theirs. We've got a couple neighbors directly behind us have dogs, and Betty Long has a shepherd. And typically, there's a lot of wildlife, and deer get them barking, fox get them barking. Every time they hear a noise, they start barking, and typically, I'm concerned, you know, 12 animals, potential 25 animals. One starts barking, and they usually all start barking. So, getting back to my question, how would it be enforced? Any kind of noise attachment?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Do we have any other public comment? Thank you. All right, any further discussion at this time from the Planning Commission?
I had one comment
Yes.
on the barking. There were 2 non-permitted kennels that were put in 300 yards away from us. I mentioned this at Hart. And it was constant, the din, whether my hearing aids were in or out. And, you know, there was just no stopping it. Day and night, unpleasant. It got better when they got closed down.
Any other comments, questions,
Mr.
discussion?
Chairman, I've got one
Yes, sir.
comment. So basically, the way that I'm reading it right now, the only condition on the SUP we have is the number of the dogs at 25. We have no other conditions or anything, do we?
At this point, no.
This is the second workshop.
Yep. And I think from what we're hearing, we actually do have concerns, just like we did with the Hart application, the noise control, security fencing, disposal of waste. We do, I think maybe some of this might be clarified if we had an actual idea of what these regulations from VDAX involve. Some of these things may be included in that, I don't know.
I've been looking at it since Mr. Smith brought it up. It appears that, and I'll look harder at it, but it looks like this would qualify as not a kennel under state code or as a private animal shelter, but I think as a boarding establishment. And then it points to 3.26518, which points back to this 3.26503, which is the one we have for Hart, which essentially seems like you need to treat animals humanely. It seems like it's fairly generic, and, you know, if they need emergency care, then she's gonna have an obligation to take them to the vet. She's gonna have to, you know, provide adequate food for them. But I'll keep digging on it.
Okay, so at this point, it looks like perhaps because of the small size and the fact that it's just a boarding kennel, it doesn't trigger any of the state regulations then.
Well, it'll trigger some of them.
Of the humane.
Right. Right.
But, so that means that basically any of these questions that have come up concerning noise control, security, fencing, et cetera, have to be handled on the local level then.
It appears that way, but I'll keep digging.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have one
Yes, sir.
question, I guess, for the applicant. A lot of times, one dog can cause a lot of barking. Do you have a way to isolate one dog if the one dog is the problem or continues to be the problem?
I mean, I have the inside of each kennel, so I have the ability to close the whole kennel. Windows I can shut, doors I can shut. So I don't have it for each individual dog, it's all of them as a whole.
I understand.
In your, let's say your typical business day, if you were boarding the dogs, you've already said that when they are outside, you're with them on a leash or just in the lot there. Are they otherwise, during the night, for example, are they inside?
They just had that outside area of the kennels and the inside area of the kennels at the same time.
Okay, so potentially, if with several dogs out there, there could be barking incidents, how would you deal with that then? Okay. So it'd be, basically, it would be your intent to would deal with any noise problems immediately by putting the dogs in an environment where they're not going to be having noise outside, basically.
Right, it'd be inside of the barn.
Mr. Chairman, I have a,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Nichols, I think maybe it would be nice if between now and the next meeting would be, if provided, could be what I saw today, a little bit more of the in-depth of what the inside would show.
Mr. Schneider, I've already made a note that I'm going to ask Ms. Hoffner, let's say tomorrow or upon leaving, for a sketch of your building, if you're willing, and maybe a few photographs that we could share with the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, if you're willing.
Yeah.
Very good.
Perfect, thank you. And secondly, being in your preliminary, in what we originally have here, you did originally ask for 12 dogs.
Yes.
Are you okay with the 12, or are you really wanting to go more than that?
I think 12's an okay number if I can't get more than that.
So you're okay with the 12? So if we just go back to the original part of the SUP saying 12 dogs, you're okay with that?
That'd be fine.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, would we want to see just sort of maybe a proposed list of conditions for the sub? Maybe Mr. Nichols could put together. I mean, obviously, and what the number is, I think, you know, is sort of going to dictate also what the level of regulation possibly is. 12 being 25 might be very different versus Hart and their 100 or whatever they rounded out at. But
I think that it would be helpful to know what the Planning Commission as a body would like to see. I'm more than happy to work with the applicant to draw up some proposed conditions. I'm essentially going to use a template from Hart where reasonable. Those seem to have been well debated. However, some of the things like bringing the animals indoors at particular hours, I don't know that that's possible in your case because you don't have a ton of indoor area. Is that correct? Or do you have indoor area for every?
Each kennel has an indoor area.
Okay, so we'll work on that in what allows the applicant to operate or where that line in the sand is for conditions. And we'll present something for joint hearing coming up. So we'll talk in the next couple days.
Okay.
Well, also, one of the things that we had discussed at the previous meeting was the bathroom. And so I had asked about that when I was there. And so I didn't go see it because it was at the other end, but she did say that she had a bathroom inside that facility, so. But we had discussed that.
Yes, I don't think the bathroom's as much of an issue for the special use permit because this particular applicant doesn't have any employees. But I do understand that she's working with the health department to get all that stuff straightened out if it's not already, so. It is, there you go.
Okay, any other? So right now, it looks like from what I'm hearing, and I'm not sure we have to word these the same way we did at Hart, but for the noise control factor, I mean, you've basically described what you would do. If we can put that in the form of a condition, so that in the event of, say, neighbor calling about noise control, that's something you can do. And we run into this all the time, so I'm not trying to pick on you, but when people in Madison County start talking about the noise of dogs barking, they run into two things in Madison County. And I think the Board of Supervisors will agree on this. There's no noise ordinance in Madison County, and it's unlikely in the future that there ever will be. And you really don't want to get the dog owners in Madison County upset. So you're not going to get ordinances about dogs in Madison County either. So voluntary proffers for conditions on the SUP, if you're willing to do that kind of thing, this is what I would do in the case of a noise problem. Make that part of the condition. You've described your existing fencing. That sounds fairly secure. That was one of the things that this Hart proposal that we were discussing, that was one of the things that was involved in that too, for the same reasons that the public comment was mentioning. Again, so perhaps describing what you have in place and how that would be appropriate for the 12 dogs that you estimate you would have. It looks like the VDAC regulations are, other than as Ann has said, are not really applicable except for the humane part of it. But you've already described your waste disposal, which seems to go along with what everybody in the county, as far as kennels, including the county dog pound. So, any other suggestions for what we might look for in the way of proposed conditions here?
I'm just going to make one recommendation, Mrs. Hoffner. Decide what you want to do as far as the number. The more you go, the higher the number, I would expect more regulation. Lower number, less regulation. It's kind of up to you as the applicant.
Okay.
Think about it. You can always come back if something's not working.
Okay.
If there's some regulation you're not meeting, we don't want to come back because something didn't get met and your neighbors are upset.
Right.
So just think about it, and you guys can work it out, I'm sure.
Yeah, and from the other end of that, if at some point you do feel like you want to expand beyond the 12, again, the same thing can be done. You can come back and reapply for an extension or amendment to the special use permit.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Yes.
The other thing I would just suggest for the body and Ms. Hoffner is one thing that we did with Hart was making sure your immediate neighbors, they had a mobile number that they could call 24 hours a day in case there was a noise problem, then they could let you know and you could take care of it to avoid, the step of getting, a sheriff involved. And then the other one is, I think for Hart, what I'm reading is all the dogs were inside between 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. So if those hours work, or something similar, that's also something that can be done to help mitigate with noise from dogs being outside and barking.
Okay, any further questions, comments, or discussion on this case? Very well, let's move to case number RZ-10-30-24-02, Virginia Lawnscapes, proposed rezoning. This is the second workshop. Michael and Rachel Williams have applied to rezone parcel 55-35I from A1 agriculture to B1 business. The rezoning application comes because of a notice of violation issued by the zoning administrator on June 11th, 2024. The applicants used the subject parcel to garage landscaping equipment. The subject improvements are accessory use to the applicant's service business, which is allowable in B1 zoning, but not in A1 zoning. Okay, Mr. Nichols, anything to add there?
Mr. Chairman, no. We'll pull it up really quick.
Okay.
There we go. Nothing major has changed, or nothing at all has changed since our last workshop on this one. It is my opinion that this is a prime parcel for rezoning. It's along the 29 corridor. It's being used for business now, so there's no change to what already exists. It simply brings them in compliance with our ordinance. And I believe that there's nothing further to add beyond that.
Okay. Does anyone have a question for Mr. Nichols?
This is an unconditional rezoning, correct?
Yes, sir.
We all understand that, once we zone this B1, I'm not saying the guy's not gonna use it what he should, but a couple days from now, if he sold the Wawa, you could put a Wawa there, and he wouldn't have to come back in here.
That is correct.
Any other question for Mr. Nichols?
I just have one. My understanding is this property, the 9+ acres, is currently or has been in land use.
Once rezoned, the property will not be in land use.
Sure. I was just wondering just to get an idea of the sort of maybe intended use of it or assumed use, like was it like forestry or?
I don't know. We can follow up with the Commissioner of Revenue. I know the amount of acreage being used productively has shrunk slowly over the years as their business needs have expanded and encroached on that space. And so coming out of land use and the rezoning is appropriate.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I was just kind of curious. And I mean, looking at it and driving past it, it certainly looks like a business use and has. I think that's probably what led them
I'm more than happy to get with Brian and email you the use that it's in now.
in here. Yeah, no, I don't think it's imperative. And, the surrounding this, and I'm very familiar with this area. There's a lot of commercial use here, and there has been for a long time. Since I was a kid, I remember going, like concrete place, like different places around there.
I mean, it's ideal for what they're doing.
And it seems there's another, commercial piece of property for sale, I think currently in front of the gutter guard manufacturer lady, there's a ton of use.
I'm getting inquiries about more rezoning to business within a mile of there.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that more applications on at least one parcel, and I've had inquiries from at least 3 others along there, so it's coming.
Yeah, and I don't, for better or worse, and I don't know if it'll probably make it in the final revised comprehensive plan, but this area is specifically mentioned as well as a possible location for development.
Correct.
Commercial development. Okay, thank you.
Have one more question.
Yes, sir. Mhm.
And I certainly agree that this should be a piece of B1 property, no doubt about it. But let's say that he has workers coming and picking up a piece of equipment or whatever, and I see there's no sewage or any kind of bathroom or drain field or whatever here, and the guy spends some time there and he needs to use the restroom, what happens?
It's a matter for the health department if they are misusing, I don't know what the correct language that is, but if a guy's using the bathroom behind the building, I mean, every farm construction site, it happens sometimes. But if it becomes a place of employment, then the building would be subject to a change of use as outlined in the building code. And the health department would get involved in, making sure they had a proper drain field. Jamie certainly is not going to let them get away with anything less than adequate by the building code. But a change of use would occur if they end up having employees there for an extended period of time.
Pete, Mike, Pete, I appreciate you bringing that up. I meant to bring it up too when they were talking about Mrs. Hoffner and bathroom regulations at the proposed kennel there. I mean, employee-wise, I understand maybe they're coming and going, or it's a rain day and they're doing maintenance on stuff or something like that. It is my understanding that at least one of the buildings has concrete floor, which is pretty conducive to working on, maintaining equipment and stuff. So, I mean, I don't know the regulations on when a bathroom would be required, but it certainly,
I believe it's 2 hours, but I'm not 100% on that. But I think that we looked at this before, and that's what it was.
Well,
Maybe I'm wrong.
2 hours, I have a feeling we're there,
I'm going to
More-
piggyback on this as well. I drove by there today, and the two buildings that are there look nice. They look like a bona fide business. It's not, as identified, in my opinion, it's not identified as just a pole barn. They're nice-looking buildings. They look like they've been made for this, and I don't know if they were there before they bought them, or if they added them. So in my opinion, it looks to me like this is a business operation and almost should be handled in a business operation and not just a pick-up, drop-off kind of scenario. And if we've made plenty of other businesses have restrooms. And I don't know, I personally don't think that we should look at this a little bit more, in my opinion, that they should follow the same thing that we've made everybody else.
If I may offer a rebuttal, the application before us is a rezoning. As far as the use of the building and for what purpose, that falls under the building department. I'm quite sure that Mr. Wilkes has spent some time with the applicants and has required changes of the building already as use has changed and it's been installed. And I do believe that the issue of a bathroom came up, and I trust Mr. Wilkes as an expert of the code, and they did not yet meet the requirements where they had to have a bathroom. But again, I can get a letter from Mr. Wilkes and his thoughts on the matter. But certainly as their business grows, as any business does, and they meet certain thresholds, the building department, I'm sure, is going to require them to take all the necessary steps.
Thank you for the reminder that this is a rezoning application. That's, that puts it back in perspective there.
Well,
Sure.
Let's talk about what's happened in the past. We had a shop out here to Shelby. We had another one out here on Seaville Road. We had one up here to Edlin. And we made all three of those people put in a bathroom.
Were
The
those,
same thing.
Mr. Elliott, were those special use permits or were those rezonings?
They were special use permits, but at the same time, Mr. Wright, you've got a business here on a piece of B1 land.
Sure. No, and I think there's also OSHA requirements too about bathroom requirements for employees.
I'd also like to add that there are enforcement actions underway on some of those parcels right now and special use permits have been revoked. And so there are enforcement mechanisms in play that are currently underway on some of those things. I'm not sure what I can and can't say, but but we'll just say that generally, that things are being enforced when they come up.
I would like to think that, that's gonna follow the B1 rezoning. The compliance of.
Of course,
businesses such
that
as-
is the goal, is in public safety and trust,
Yeah.
and
Get it
yes,
rezoned first, and then everything else will fall into place.
that's the
That-
idea.
That would be my thought.
I agree, Mr. Schneider.
Yeah, and there's the B1 right adjacent to it, if I remember correctly, that's a fairly recent change to a B1. This area within the mile of Route 29 corridor is identified as the appropriate place for B1. We have it right next to a large M1 area, which has even more potential uses. And the use that's, well, I guess the basic thing is that the use it's in now is B1, so it should be zoned as it's being used. It's not appropriate for an A1.
The alternative to not rezoning this property is that the activity that exists there now does not get to continue.
Okay, any other questions or
One
comments?
question,
Yes.
and we're going to go away from the restroom facility area. Probably for Alan or Hannon, because this has an easement through another A1 property, and kind of to Pete's point, if we go B1, legally, does that cause any issues down the road if it is a Wawa, and then that we have, is that going to be a legal issue either for the county or is it then civil? Whether,
Well, I
because
mean,
when I'm looking at the
would have
deed,
to
I don't see,
approve.
I'm not a lawyer, so that's probably why I'm not getting it. Yeah, I guess, are there any pitfalls
Can't
with
sell beer.
traveling through a private easement on A1 to B1?
Do you want to, or you want me to?
oh, you're saying in order to access this property, they're using somebody else's easement?
Exactly.
Correct. If we look up here, he's looking at this, I'll do it on, so whatever one sees.
I mean,
It goes through this one here to get to that property. It's a wide paved area going through there.
I believe that's gonna be an issue between the two property
Maybe a
owners,
civil.
and it's not gonna be it's gonna be their problem to deal with amongst themselves, not the county's issue.
It doesn't, it shouldn't sway how we look, okay.
Correct.
I mean, it's in the deed, it doesn't
yes,
say
sir, I
it clearly
believe
for
that's
any type
correct.
of rezoning.
All right, it appears to be a 50-foot access easement, so that should be adequate for any B1 use, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think adequate, you're gonna have a lot of traffic.
Right,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I think that would
down
be
the road.
the friction if it comes up is.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Smith.
An
The church is still
overburden of
A1.
Okay, any other question for staff? Is the applicant here?
They are.
Yes. Would you like to address the planning commission or answer any questions? Yeah, for sure. Okay, come on up to and identify yourself.
Michael Williams, and I'm the president of the company. In the summertime, we do put a porta-john there. That's our busy season, of course. We put a porta-john there. We've actually already hired a firm that has already came in and marked for the septic and the bathroom and stuff. All we have to do is submit that to the county when the time is right. So we just have to pay that fee and hire a company to, dig our septic and stuff. So I think that should address some of those concerns as well.
So you are planning to
Yes,
provide facilities? Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. We were ahead of it before this even took place. So we've got the guy draw the plans and everything, so all I gotta do is submit them to the county and pay that fee.
With the buildings that are there, do you do maintenance there or?
Most of our maintenance is done out. Or like if our trucks break down or it needs brakes or, we typically take it to, JMR up on 33 or just wherever for the most part, but we don't do any like maintenance. If our mowers break down, we take them to John Deere.
Okay, so you work with the dealers and
Yes, sir.
where you bought them from, okay.
Yes, sir.
Does anyone have any other questions for the applicant? We appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Any public comment on this case? If not, any further discussion at this point? Okay. Moving on to case number RZ-10-30-24-01, Blue Ridge Ag LLC, recovery of by right uses. This is the first workshop on this. Mr. Josh Heggie, on behalf of Blue Ridge Ag LLC, is seeking to recover the by right B1 business uses of his property located on Seminole Trail, tax map number 32-102. An application for rezoning, case number RZ-04-23-4, was previously approved by the Board of Supervisors on March of 2023 with conditions. As a result, the applicant lost the right to some B1 uses by proffer. The applicant's business needs have changed, and he is seeking the restoration of all the B1 by right uses. Anything to add there, Alan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is our first workshop on this one. Many of you are familiar with the original case that came through with Mr. Heggie. And I'd like to take just a moment to point out the scope of what we're looking at here. You'll bear with me. Did want to speak to the Williams before they left. So if you look at the summary of the by right uses that are up on the screen here, the uses that are in yellow are what were proffered away in the original application, and the use in green is all that was retained. And so it seems that with such a narrow focus, the applicant has come to the conclusion that it's hard to operate or explore other opportunities, and so that's what we're here to discuss tonight. But that's about, I'll turn it back to the commission.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Alan?
I have a question. In that, so is this all of the 13.3 going to be B1 or just the 8.9?
The applicant stated they're going to retain the residential portion. They may want a home there at some point, so just the 8.9. The section that's zoned B1 now is going to stay zoned B1. What we're really looking for is just a change in the proffered conditions. So the uses in yellow, which is essentially all of them except for agricultural supply store, were proffered away. The applicant is seeking to restore those as right by uses. By right uses.
Was
pardon
that
me.
in our packet? Because I can't find it.
It should be in your packet, yes,
Was it
sir.
on the original packet?
Yes, sir. I believe so. Maybe I'm wrong, but we sent out the revision.
Because I certainly can't read it up there.
Essentially, if you look at the by right uses for B1, everything's gone except for just agricultural supply store. The applicant has no other by right uses at this time with his conditional rezoning.
So is this property in land use right now?
I recall asking that question to the Commissioner of Revenue, and I do not believe that Mr. Heggie is in land use. Is that correct?
I never put it in land use, and I was not aware that it ever was.
I think the taxes are market rate.
$400 on a piece of B1 property is right.
The way it was assessed, I did the math on it, it was 74 cents per hundred. It's the mill rate. So I believe that it was assessed at market rate and not at, not at land use.
$403 for 9 acres of B1?
For the first half of the year? Because I did the same thing. I did the same thing you did when I looked at it. Right?
Mr. Nichols, I really appreciate that you picked up on that and did the math and already have the answer. It does seem cheap, but good for Madison County residents.
Yeah, I mean, frontage on 29, and that's, as far as.
The rate may change with it.
Yeah, as far as being any land use tax rates, it appears to be all wooded except for the area that you've got cleared, and it's not a large enough parcel to be under forestry land use, so I don't see how it could have been land use.
So again, I'll make the comment, we do understand this is unconditional
Mhm.
rezoning, and he can do whatever he chooses to do with by right if this passes.
That is correct.
One of the conditions, and that was the previous number 5, was on or before April 1, 2025, a minimum of a 30-foot section of the site's driveway connecting shall be paved. Is that still gonna stay there? I mean, I think that would be one that shouldn't go away, because we thought that that should be there to begin with. So when we talk about taking properties away, are we keeping that one, or we?
I'm going to encourage you to ask the applicant to unpack those and what's possible, what's not, and what he's requesting. So
Okay.
you guys can talk
Sure.
directly about that.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions for Alan? All right, if not, let's move to the applicant. If you would go ahead and identify yeah, you don't have to get up then. Thank you. Identify yourself, and we'll go from there.
My name is Josh Hagee, and happy to answer any questions. I also have a bit of a narrative.
Yeah,
although
if you would go ahead first and
Sure,
do that.
let me,
please.
maybe I'll just stand at the podium.
That one's got a microphone too, if you want me to hold that one. Yeah. There you go.
So good evening to all of you. Is that coming through?
Yes,
Okay.
it should be on.
There it is.
There you go. Cool.
Got the green light, yes.
Yeah, good evening to everyone. Yeah, just wanted to explain a little bit why I'm back here. It was an enjoyable learning experience being here last time. And I appreciated the consideration you gave me last time. The decision you made last time would have been sufficient had my business plans continued as I expected them to. I was selling a heavy glass milk bottle at that point, in addition to a pretty full line of dairy equipment, so stainless steel, this and that, for dairy farmers, small dairy farmers. There are only a few dairy farmers in this country, though, in relation to the rest of the population, so it's a very small niche market. So we were selling the glass milk bottles primarily to dairy farmers initially, and discovered that consumers like these bottles. So it's fairly trendy to move to glass, to move plastic and all these things. So we moved into glass, and it became 80% of our revenue, selling glass to consumers, kitchen makers across the country, shipping them. So we would bring these bottles in, pack them in our basement, and send them out to Amazon each week. So I saw you last, or we were together for the previous rezoning in April of '23.
Can't hear me.
No.
It's not coming through.
No, we're gonna give you another one. I apologize.
Is that better?
Much.
I can hear myself. So we were here last in April of '23, and bottle sales were still going well at that point. In the meantime, without boring you with the China economic strategy, they have targeted the American glass industry in my analysis and in others' analysis. China has has about 5 practices, but one of them is market swamping, to take over a market. So they subsidize a certain industry and swamp the market. So they operate as a collective. The Republic of China will subsidize, glass factories across their country, subsidize the purchase of raw materials and all that, and then swamp the global market until they take out or put out of business all the private manufacturers, and then they own the market, and then they can raise that one and go after the next, raise prices on glass and go after the next industry. They've done that with steel. They've done that, you've seen that in a lot of different areas over the years, I'm sure. Glass was one of the last few remaining industries that the U.S. could compete at, and I would see that changing pretty quickly because it has changed in the last 2 years. Long story short, they have an exact copy of our American-made glass milk bottles, the ones that are made in Chicago. They have my pictures on Alibaba selling container loads of these things, and they're just priced way cheaper. I just about can't give away bottles for the price they're charging. They're targeting the industry. So that market has disappeared. So I've been in business since I was 15. That's 19 years now in the dairy business, and I have no intention of changing. I'd love to stay in business, but I do find the need to diversify a little more and find an alternative product line in order to cover overhead and stay in operation. The dairy supplies, like I had, the stainless steel section, that 20% is still strong, it's still growing, but like we say, there's only so many dairy farmers in the country. And there are other dairy supply companies, of course. So that's what I'd like to request, is just the freedom to carry a little broader range of product. We've been delving into chicken products, which are a lot more people have chickens than have cows. So we have portable chicken tractors and some of these things, and things like that help. We do need more than that. I've been talking with shed companies to have different storage solutions. I'd love to have a range of sheds possibly there if that works out. Maybe some run-in sheds, some different storage things. Shipping containers seem to be in high demand, actually. We work in Orange County with Bid Wilson, and there's high demand for the product. So, yeah, a lot of our products would work. A lot of farmers need the products we sell, but other people need them as well, and so I'd like to request zoning to allow for that. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Are you primarily doing drop shipping? You get online orders? Then you arrange shipping to Amazon or whoever's going to distribute them, or do you have warehousing and product actually coming through the county?
We carry all of our product in-house. We store it, we ship it, we handle all of it. In my basement currently, in a shed in my backyard.
And the shipping containers out on 29, those are yours?
That is correct.
Okay.
They have, go ahead.
Are you working out of the containers, or are you selling the containers there?
The line along the road, the ugly ones that I'd love to get rid of, they have milk cans in them.
Oh.
They have a silicone bottle cap, 80,000 of them or something, from when we were moving volume. A skid steer, this and that. There are some nice new ones back on the back edge that are dropped off because there was an issue getting in containers through December. I couldn't get them, people wanted them, and so I'd order, and well, now suddenly they're coming in and the sales are down, and it's like suddenly we have to take them and do something with them. But yeah.
So basically, you get them dropped there, and then you carry them to Wilson, put them in the auction, and sell them to the public.
Wilson and Mountain Valley over here, Elkton, yeah.
Other questions?
I have the question about
Yeah.
the access, the paving, the access.
Yeah. So when we met previously, we had a number 3, large aggregate, it was recycled concrete. as road base down, which was a safety concern. And so we talked about paving that by this April. In the meantime, I did get a foot of recycled asphalt put down, and that's packed in really hard. It's a fine aggregate. I even have found a chemical, or chemical, I guess, a product you can put on recycled asphalt to reactivate the asphalt. I could do that, or we could pave it, if you would desire that.
How much traffic are you gonna have coming in and out of there? I mean, I don't know, I mean, I've seen what you've done, obviously. And of course, what the concern was bringing stuff out on 29. And I don't know if that product you're talking about would suffice or not. That would be, something that's to probably talk about and see if that condition is gonna be something that would be allowed or not. But are you gonna have a lot of traffic, you think? This is still a little bit away from the B1 rezoning. Not rezoning, but all rights brought back. But it has to do with whether or not we want to take that number 5 back away.
I would love to have several customers a day.
Are these going to be larger trucks, you think, or is this going to be trucks bringing stuff in and out, or?
Well, so containers and sheds move on a pickup and, a trailer behind a pickup. At this time, I don't foresee any reason that I would need a tractor trailer.
Those 20-foot containers are not coming on a tractor trailer?
No, I've never had a tractor trailer in there. I carry those on a gooseneck and a pickup.
So, Mr. Nicholson, if he wanted to put a construction entrance in there and he's talking about paving, he's gonna have a set of drawings and get approval from VDOT to do that, I would feel sure.
That is absolutely correct. Got a little too close to it.
Other questions?
So as it is, what we had said earlier, were you going to get, because I'm familiar with that as well, but have you talked to VDOT about getting a permit to do a entrance into your business?
So it's an existing entrance. The previous, it was there. Neighbor says it's been there since whenever 29 went in. It was improved, obviously it was improved. But Willis Bedsall, who was previous to the gentleman who's, I think, in charge now, I had him out on several occasions, and he said that, he gave me approval to go ahead and make changes. There's a change to a low-volume commercial entrance, that's a designation, which needs just, I guess, final approval, that there were certain specs for it. It's been 2 years now since that conversation, but I had that conversation with him.
Mr. Nichols, have we done anything with VDOT on this at all?
I've not had a site plan come before me.
I'm only asking because we do have this one condition on the prior.
That's correct. As we're redoing conditions on this stuff, we're essentially starting from a clean slate, as if, we're starting as if there are no conditions. But if we're evaluating the previous ones, I'm not aware, unless Mr. Heggie has something to ask, of any previous conversations to this point with VDOT. I don't think that the building was pursued, and if the building was pursued and an entrance was going to get done, it all would have, gone to VDOT at that point. But we never made it that far, so I don't think any steps were taken to modify or improve the entrance other than what Mr. Heggie stated.
Well, we did put the condition in there to begin with for a reason.
Understood.
So that's why I'm bringing this up.
That's fair.
Mr. Nichols?
Even if he doesn't put the building in, Mr. Nichols, if he don't put the building in and he's running the type of business he's running out of there, he's got a lot of traffic in and out of there. So even if the building's not in consideration, if we zone this B1, don't you think something should be done to have a proper entrance there? Because even with these containers, there's a lot of traffic.
There is. This came up with in PDRC. And all Mr. Nguyen had to say, who's the engineer in Charlottesville, on the matter, it's very loud. All Mr. Nguyen had to say was, as he proposed to make changes in the use, or if it was to exceed, was it 20 trips per day, something more than we were doing now, then it would have to be reevaluated for that particular use. But because he's less than 20 trips per day, and the use was small, he didn't have any commentary. He said if you were going to change something, build on it, intensify the use, he would look at it then. But typically for rezonings, VDOT doesn't ask us for anything. They say, call us when you've got a site plan. So reasonable to consider, certainly, for future considerations. But let's just take the extreme example. If the applicant were to decide that he wanted to put a professional office there and, clear an acre and put the building in there, something similar to Mr. Esch's property we'll talk about coming up here, then he would have to have a site plan. You'd have to have approval from VDOT and the health department. At the time you went to execute a plan, you'd have to get all these approvals. So just because he has the right to do something doesn't necessarily mean he has the ability.
Okay, I have just a real specific question here. Are you seeking to simply change one of the proffers, this proffer 2, and eliminate proffer 2? Or are you trying to eliminate the whole existing application, or, no, it's not an application anymore, it was actually approved, and start all over? Because that's two different situations. What we're doing right now is, as far as I can see, is we're discussing eliminating proffer 2.
What it is, Steve, is basically, it's like Mr. Nicholson said, we're starting from square one. There's nothing on this piece of property right now. We're starting from square one.
Mr. Elliott's correct. At this time, we have no offered proffers. It's a brand-new application for B1 fully intact with no proffers today. Is that correct, Mr. Heggie?
Well,
Okay.
I don't know, maybe, Hannah, it doesn't seem quite logical to me. It's already zoned B1. How can we do another rezoning on it to B1?
Yeah, it's weird. So it's B1 with conditions, right? So it's as if our ordinance for this particular property is B1 with everything that's proffered in it as if it's part of the zoning ordinance. What Mr. Heggie's asking is for it to get rezoned B1 like the ordinance originally has, which is just whatever the requirements of B1 are without any of the special conditions that have previously been put on it.
Okay, so we're starting over with a clean slate, basically.
Yes, sir.
He's not even asking for a rezoning. He's asking
Right.
for all the properties to be wiped out.
Yeah, which is what I'm trying to get at. It's two different things. You're not actually asking for rezoning, you're just asking to eliminate all the proffers.
That's right. So
Is that
instead of
correct?
B1
You wanna
with conditions,
eliminate
just
all the proffers.
B1.
Yes.
Okay,
I
so
mean,
all 6 proffers you want to eliminate, which that is appropriate for a public hearing and so forth, yes.
Yeah.
can I ask a question of the applicant? Mr. Heggie, for the things you're talking about doing business-wise, is there anything that you can't do right now that you could do if it got, I'll say, rezoned?
Yeah, it would be some of the dual-use products that I can sell. So storage buildings, farmers might buy them, and it could probably be called farm supply store, but non-farmers might also buy them. So it doesn't really seem, appropriate there.
Well, Mr. Wright, he's not in compliance with what he's doing now. He's allowed to sell farm products out of it, but not storage containers.
So
Well, I hear you.
go ahead.
I guess I was just more wondering, does he need all the uses of B1?
And I would clarify to that point, it's a really good point on Mr. Elliott's point. I'm not advertising, I don't have signage, billboards and that. I don't know. Well, I am dropping off and relocating. I mean, I'm dropping my property on my real estate, I guess. And loading back up to take it back out to the auction yard. I don't know where that falls.
So right
Sorry.
now, you're basically storage facility for your own materials.
I guess, yeah, which, I don't know if that fits or not, but I apologize if it doesn't.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we've had a long list of regulation skirters tonight, so we might as well keep that going. I don't think you're trying to do anything egregious. And Mr. Wright, yeah, that was kind of my question too. It seems like most of what you're doing is falling in still to your, what you know, which is agricultural supply. Except like you said, when you get into the buildings and stuff like that, and obviously you want room to sell what you can sell that kind of falls within what you know, which makes sense. As far as the rezoning, I'm kind of looking at that as like, we rezoned it back when, a year ago or whatever, basically like B1-2. And now you're just looking to rezone it B1. And so that makes sense to me. But unlike the property over in Shelby, which was, that we looked at for the Virginia Lawnscapes, which was adjacent to M1 and other B1 parcels and stuff like that. This is largely adjacent to R1 and what's this orange stuff here?
It's R1 and A1, or maybe R2.
Is that R2, the orange?
I believe that's correct. Let's take a
Okay,
peek.
so, which is kind of the opposite side of things. It's like a heavy residential area. So, to me, in my mind, when I'm looking at rezoning something, you kind of have A1, which is sort of Madison's catch-all for, like what you have in the country. It's a little bit of everything possibly, with an agricultural sort of intent. And then, where anything could possibly be feasible. But then, on the R1 side, when you're getting adjacent to that, I think, like a large variety of commercial uses may not be appropriate. And that's just my thought. I don't remember exactly what we all went through last time. I know you went through your plans in detail, but you sort of just proffered to do away with everything to make it easy, which made it easier for us. So to me, I don't think everything that's on the list of B1 is necessarily appropriate here with the heavy residential, in a heavy residential area, but you're certainly going to have mixed-use stuff everywhere. Fishback Road's going to be a prime example of that. There's mixed-use R1, with B1 and commercial and stuff when you're on 29. I don't think that's really that uncommon either, so.
Mr. Cowan, could I just ask you to just expand on your thoughts in terms of what you think would, and I know we're talking in the world of hypotheticals, but things you wouldn't want to see in this particular piece of property?
I'm not exactly sure because, prior to a little, several minutes ago, I wasn't sure what the intended use of the property was.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I just didn't know if you already had any thoughts on it.
Not really. Yeah, not really.
Okay, fair enough.
I'll get them together at some point then.
Yeah, I think that is something we may need to explore, though. I agree with Nathan that there's potentially some of these B1 uses were not appropriate. It's essentially a residential neighborhood there. I mean,
Mr. Chairman, you may develop your portion of R1 yourself for your future home.
Correct, that was the intent of leaving the map of the triangle over against the neighbors.
I think we probably all agree just kind of the common sense of what we would want in our backyard. So that's pretty much where we're
True.
leaning. So, I agree with Nathan with that heavy, the concentration of R1 and R2 across the road, which looks like someone had 3 or 4 houses on this, satellite imaging. Potential for having some critical feedback from your neighbors instead of public hearing.
Hospital or public service, firehouse, rescue station.
Mr. Chairman, it seems that he's targeting primarily farmers and homesteaders, though. So there are a lot of things through this list of 7 different groupings that homesteaders may well be interested in. Everything from rooftop solar to what he's doing, to milk, so long as he stays below the Chinese radar.
And I do want to elaborate too, like, it's also on the most major corridor in Madison County with 60,000, I don't know how many trips per day Madison has, you know, like 29 has, something like that.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, you know. So, you know, like, there's that.
I think I read somewhere too where you were gonna sell some Bobcat equipment or intended to.
I would like to explore the option of attachments and implements, yeah. I think it would display well along 29, but just, I don't know yet.
I think, based on what I'm hearing, and we haven't had any public comment yet, but it doesn't look like we're going to, would you be comfortable working with Alan? And maybe be a little, I mean, just asking flat out for just drop this and we start over with a blank slate and have everything. Would you be comfortable working with Alan and developing some proffers? I mean, obviously, most of us are a little uncomfortable about the possibility of some of the by right uses in B1 here. And, you know, we can't sit here and negotiate with you on that. That's totally up your business. So if that's something that you're willing to do, maybe narrow things down a little bit for us. I mean, I understand what you're saying here, and I kind of agree with you. You got your everything just kind of yanked out from under you by China, and you clearly do need to be able to move forward somehow. But I don't know. I think most of us would like to see some more direction about where you are trying to move. So
I'd like to go out on a limb here and just say, I think it's, from this, I think it's the B1 on 29.
Okay.
I think he ought to be able to do what he wants to do with it. I think if you look at the thing on John Weaver Road right behind it, there's some M1s.
Mhm.
Look across 29 over there on Ridgeview, there's B1s over there. You go down 29, you've got winery, you've got some M1s over there, you've got the winery with several B1s right there.
Don't forget the junkyard.
Yes, sir. What's up, the orange? R2.
All right, I guess we should ask, unless there's some further questions for you. Is there public comment? You would like, okay. Go ahead and.
I'll check online too.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm Al Ash. I live just around the corner there.
Oh, okay.
So the question I have, was that zone B1 before? Was it residential
it was
R1 or A1?
I think it was R1.
I thought it was R1.
I think it was all
It was
R1, but I'll
R1.
double check.
So think about it this way a little bit. So if, let's say that whole piece was R1. Hey, we all complain about too many houses being built in this county. If we go, well, we don't all. That's right. You're right. You're right, Clay. We don't all. But my point being is, here is a revenue generator, and I'm with Mr. Snyder that I think B1 in that corner is appropriate, and that he ought to be able to sell sheds to a farmer or a regular dude or whatever. And so I, for one, see that as being a good use, and I'd like to speak in favor of it.
Thank you, sir. No other comments? Okay. Any further discussion? All right, this was first workshop, right?
Yes, sir, we got plenty of time.
Okay. All right, any further discussion at all on that one? All right, thank you, sir. Okay. Case number SP-01-09-25, Anabaptist Health Share, Site Plan Application, First Workshop. Country View Homes has filed a site plan application on behalf of Anabaptist Health Share for a property located on South Seminole Trail and identified as Madison County Tax Map 48-8C. The site is located on the west side of Highway 29, just south of Orange Road. The property contains a total of 3.214 acres and is zoned B1. Business. The project, known as Anabaptist Health Share Office, is proposing to construct a new 14,091 square foot office building. Pursuant to Appendix 1 of zoning, Article 8-1-3, office buildings are a by right use. 43,554 square feet of earth will be disturbed during construction. Okay, Alan, anything to add there?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Esch has been working with the zoning office since before my tenure in putting this project together. It's gone through many iterations. Most recently, before this final one that's come before this body, the project was essentially ready to go. It was under 40,000 square feet of land disturbance, and a final comment from Culpeper Soil and Water necessitated the addition of the water retention pond that's in essentially the center of the screen up there in the plan. And that took them over the 40,000 square feet threshold for administrative approval. Culpeper, we're still waiting final comments from Culpeper Soil and Water, but the engineer, the applicant, Mr. Sexton, have all been in constant communication. The most recent exchange of communication from Culpeper Soil and Water was said that while they are reviewing the final plan, they are not anticipating any changes because they've been working very well with the engineer, and that's gone great. The project is 6 square feet short of going to DEQ. Because it was so close, our ENS administrator did send an email to DEQ and asked them, hey, this is so close, do you want to see it? They said, is it less than an acre? Well, yeah, okay, well, then we don't want to see it. So that's where we are. The only thing about this one that's a little different and may require some explanation is the parking on this one overflows into the adjacent lot. In your packet is an easement that has been drawn up from the lower parcel on the plans here to the upper one, granting an easement for the purposes of parking in the existing gravel parking lot that's down there. So they meet the ordinance for parking requirements that way. It's the only strange thing about this one. Off the top of my head, that's all I've got for you. I'll turn it back to the Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Mike, okay.
So speaking of the easements, obviously I read that first one you were speaking of, but there's, I'm not familiar with who's the transfer station behind it. And maybe we just want to wait till he gets up there. My question
We can
is,
talk.
who is that transfer station? So my concern would be is that, so there's an easement that goes back to the transfer station that if you go back into the other plans, that easement's gonna be overlaid with parking spaces. So are we overlaying an existing, easement that needs to be moved over? Because I don't know, once again, I don't know who's in charge of that substation back there. So do you wanna answer that or do you wanna wait for?
Either way is fine. You know, the easement certainly will not be blocked, but where it exists, I think I saw commentary on Mr. Bain's plan that the plan is to relocate that easement just a few feet to the north to allow it to exist between the lanes that go between there. But it's not going to encumber access to where that, that building is that's back there.
Well, the site plan says convert existing gravel driveway to 7 parking spaces. So yes, that would, if that goes into parking spaces, if people
Yeah, then reasonably, the easement will be relocated, and I think that is that legal process already underway, Al? Okay.
Yeah, we might as well.
Do I need to identify myself again? No. So what they're doing is that easement runs through there, and there was not like specifically where it goes. It was a gravel road that goes back there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to tie in the pavement to their gravel going over to the building so it won't be impeded. We can also change if we'd like to see it change, we can change it. But it's like Facebook or whatever, and it's a catastrophe to try to deal with them. Yeah, that. No, this is, that little building back there is Facebook. Yeah, that's their substation for Facebook.
It's privately owned cable.
Correct. Yes, privately owned cable is what it is.
There you go.
No, then they want it to be obscure. That is the point. Yeah, that is the point. Yes, sir.
You know where the new entrance is being built there? Before you
Just
get to the vet?
got one comment. I mean, 6 square feet short from DEQ regulated. If one of your guys gets his truck stuck in the grass and spins tires, you're over
I
the
understand
limit. I
completely.
mean, you know, Meander came in here and was like trying to avoid that and some preliminary stuff, and we pretty much all told him, like, come on, just, you're gonna go over it, just plan on it. I don't know how much room you have in here if you guys say, well, we're gonna follow this tight line, or if you said, hey, we're gonna go over, let's allow 20 feet here, 20 feet here, so we have some room to work, or how tight you're cutting it out of the gate.
So-
But when I see something like that, it's like,
Okay, so here was the deal. Before the dry detention basin there that Culpeper Soil and Water wanted, we were well under. So that's what squeezed us pretty tight. What I would anticipate doing, this is what I plan to do. I plan, when we go there to start the work, we're going to create a parking lot up there where the 21 spaces are in front of the office building first to stage material and do all that kind of thing. My intention is to wait to put the drain field in until the building is 85–90% complete, middle of summer, when I can seat it down, do my work. If we do happen to go over here or there a little, like you said, a truck getting stuck and that kind of thing, I want to mitigate that. So that is, I'm keenly aware that the campground is back there and they are under a DEQ permit, and we will be very mindful of that, because I understand the risk that comes with that.
Where's the outlet for that?
So right below the property line, right there where they put that 12-inch outlet in, right below the property line, if you can't see it very good on this picture. Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, so if you look right there behind where the outlet is, that there's another little dot behind there. There is an 18-inch. There's a grate with an 18-inch sewer that goes down to their stormwater management pond. So Henchy and Baines also did the campground. So when they did that, so you have water coming off of this property, and they captured that water in the low place between those buildings and put it into their stormwater management pond. So what Culpeper Soil and Water was concerned about was that we're consolidating water with the paved parking lot and gutter drains and that kind of thing. So they want to use this dry detention basin with a 12-inch pipe in it, so that when we have a water storm event, we hold that water and release it 12 inches at a time to an 18-inch behind it.
Well, I thought that's what I was seeing.
Yeah, there's a metal grate. There's a metal grate back there. Yes, sir.
So let me ask you a question. If he went in there and where the parking lot is, he didn't disturb any grass, anything in there. He went in there and built the parking lot and stabilized the parking lot, and the parking lot is finished. Now he's under 40,000 square feet before he disturbs any of that. That's what I would do. I don't know, I'm asking you guys. over the 40,000 feet, if he stabilizes the parking lot and this is a done deal, not over that. He's still gotta put the detention pond in at a later time, but he's not over the 40,000 square feet.
One of the things that I'll just, no, I understand, and I'm trying to, how would you say, do the right thing, if you will, but like, one of the things that I would love for the planning commission to consider, somebody somewhere decided that 40,000 was a good number, and probably for 90% of what happens in this county, it's a perfect number, but DEQ takes their stand at 43,560 square feet. What would be handy would be if the ordinance would be the same as DEQ, this would be an over-the-counter permit that Mr. Nichols could write to me, and next week I could go and start my work instead of waiting until March the 15th because I need to go in front of both the board and the planning commission. I'm not complaining, I'm just, you know, it kind of killed me because we had worked so hard to design something that was under the 40,000 only to have that extra pond in there.
Because they required it.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
Obviously, that's something we can't change unless the board says that they would like for us to look into.
I understand. It's
But
just
I
a,
think it's a good idea. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
but here we are, and you know, I'm open to any questions or concerns that you have. We want to do this correctly. We want to do this right, and you can. I think my past work that I've done here in the community speaks for itself, and we will be taking measures to ensure that we're not being difficult for the campground or doing things that are out of line.
Yeah, one of the other things that you just mentioned kind of offhand, the length of time involved here, and this was something we were discussing earlier before the meeting. Is there a requirement for site plan applications to do 2 workshops? I know we've been traditionally doing them for SUPs and rezoning and so forth.
It would be at the discretion of the chairman. However, when we got to this stage, we had already, it would not have changed his public hearing date in this case for
Because
the
it's already
advertising
set.
requirements.
Okay, yeah.
But with PDRC in place, and then a workshop, and then the board, it may be something that you would consider what cases you want 2 workshops and what you don't. That is for you all to decide.
So there's,
Here, the only thing we're looking at is a little pond.
yeah.
Well, and one of the other things that happens is, to Mr. Nichols' point, is you don't have, if y'all would change the bylaw to 43,560 at an acre like DEQ does, then it wouldn't have to be advertised either. But because you set it at 40,000, and now it goes in front of the board, now it has to be advertised. So that's the catch with, and it's like Alan said, we're out of time to cut it any shorter than what it is to meet the advertising requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Because it now has to go in front of the board. Fair enough, it's fine.
Well, hopefully with this time of year, the,
It is, no, you're drawing parallel between going to DEQ standard 43,560.
Right.
Definitely, there's a basis there. Just because you have a good track record in Madison, I think is a decent thing to say. There's other people that think 40,000 is too broad, and they would rather have site plans brought in here, so there is a public comment period. So it does go both sides, and that's a
Yes, sir.
But no, it's a good point, for sure. Never heard that before.
Alan or Anna, how often does DEQ change their specifications and the requirements often, or is that been in place for a long?
It's been like probably 6, 7, 8 years. They went and they gave us an option whether or not we do in-house or we go to a district model. And as small of a county as we are with the workload, we couldn't justify doing all of the DEQ reviews in-house. So we subbed it out like everybody else did.
Any other question for the applicant? No further questions? Any public comment? All right. Thank you,
It's
sir.
an exciting
Yep.
proposal, Al.
Yeah,
It's an exciting proposal.
Thank you,
Yeah.
appreciate it.
yeah. Kind of off the topic, can you give us a rough, it has nothing to do with the site plan.
go ahead.
How many people are probably going to be employed here? And
Approximately 35 or 40. It's going to have about 38 offices, something like that. So it's going to be 3 floors. The basement is going to be mostly used for some of their. They have like their own fitness center. They have a kitchen, some stuff like that. And down there, then they have like once a year they have a where the heads. So there's district representatives will come in and they'll do slideshow presentations and that kind of thing in the basement. The main floor will have they're like 8 by 10 offices, 8 by 12 or something, just stacked up. And then the executive suites are upstairs in the upper level, and there's fewer offices up there. Their on-site attorney will have his office in there and that kind of thing. So yeah, approximately 40.
not to be greedy, but are a lot of these going to be local?
Yeah, they will live here. They are recruiting from other localities to have people move here to work there because it is kind of a specialized niche. This company, it basically is a nonprofit. They're a registered nonprofit, and they only handle health share for Amish and Mennonite people. They currently have about 12,000 members and are waiting to almost double as soon as this office is built.
Thank you. That really wasn't any of my business.
Yeah,
but I was
it's going to be
curious.
a nice size colonial style building. I think it'll fit in well.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay, any further discussion? We don't have any public, well, do we have any public comment online? You said there was nobody online. No one online. Okay. In that case, the next case is case number 2024-ZOA-12-18-02, adoption of personal campground definition, second workshop. The adoption of a definition for a personal campground is being proposed to allow for by right recreation on private property, but regulate the use of recreational vehicles or RVs and tents to prevent their use as permanent residences. Okay. And this is kind of a moving target, but Alan, would you give us an update on where we are?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In just a minute, I'll have it up here on the screen, but it's in all of your packets. This, of course, is a work in progress. We're at the second workshop. It has been advertised for public hearing at this point, but certainly we're not waiting on anything that's imminent with a decision here. If we had to take more time, we could. The definition is up there, and I'm happy to read it out loud if you'd like. But essentially what we're doing is I've incorporated specifications for the site size of a campsite. And they are in line with the commercially minded ordinances, the primitive campground and the camper camp, trailer camp, Article 15 and 15A. They're the same. So if we had a situation where somebody built a personal campground and we later discovered that they went to commercial use, it would be easy to get them their special use permit and bring them into compliance that way. There's criteria in here for more than 3 campgrounds require a permit issued by the health department. I was talking to Emily and Claire earlier this week, and we were just having discussion, and they asked me about Mr. Kratz's case and how that went through. And when I mentioned the ordinance, they said, okay, well, the health department, it doesn't matter if they're for RVs or for, tents. If you have more than 3 campsites on a property, it doesn't matter if it's for compensation or not, the health department requires a permit. So I went ahead and included that language to cue us in if we have to take enforcement actions on this, that it would help to let me know or another administrator that needs to be in place. During previous discussions and as we've been developing this thing, we essentially said that we were okay with conservation and agricultural districts being appropriate for campgrounds. Mr. Smith had mentioned that he had a large R1 parcel. Others do as well that might be appropriate to have a personal campground. So it reads kind of odd in here, but there's a reason for it, that we did not specify a minimum acreage for A1 and C1, but we did specify a minimum acreage for R1. It had to be at least 10 acres. All of this is subject to change at your discretion, of course, and that's where we went. Mr. Wright kindly sent me a little bit of feedback that if we want to go through this, I'm happy to interject, or Mr. Wright certainly welcome to, mainly on the basis of the size of the parcels, and do we want to specify a minimum size for the A1 and C1 districts before you can get personal campgrounds? With that, I'll turn it back to you for discussion.
Yeah, Mike?
I don't know if it's just the way that I'm reading this, and I'm far from being the one that does punctuality. But the second line down, which is still the first sentence, it says not to exceed 30 consecutive days and in tents. Is that correct, or am I not reading that properly?
We can fine tune all of this. Let me pull it up in Word and we'll just do it live.
Yeah, and, well, you had it up there. Here you go.
Yeah, but I'm going to do it so that way we can change it. So let's just do it. All right.
You're right there.
Yeah.
It says 30 consecutive days, comma, and in tents.
Let's
Is
see
that-
here.
I'm just trying to make sure I'm reading that properly.
Not in exchange for rent leave, otherwise turn in conversation, not to exceed 30 seconds. Aha, it needs to go to the end. Oh, good Lord, I can't do that while looking up there. 2 seconds.
Yeah, that's a pretty complex sentence.
Yeah, we'll clean that up. It's a work in progress.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is what we
well,
do.
I'm just pointing that out. I mean, I didn't know if it was trying to say something else, or if I just wasn't reading it properly, or.
That was a
my mind
poorly
wasn't
worded
working right.
sentence. My apologies.
And secondly, if you go to the next line down, same sentence, because this is a very long sentence. The 30 consecutive days and in tents, campers, recreational vehicles, or travel trailers designed for single families. Now, travel trailers, comma, designed for single families. Now, I don't know if that's, the comma goes away and now it says, or travel trailers designed for single families. And I don't know what
So-
other travel trailers are designed for multifamilies. I don't know what we're trying, I'm just trying to make sure
How
I'm
about
getting
this?
this.
Instead of the, instead of the, we'll fix the grammar here in a minute. Let's work on the content, if we may. So, designed for single families. I suppose we can omit that simply on the spirit of I've never seen a multifamily
That's what I was getting at.
camper,
Well,
which is fine.
I think it's also supposed to be able to modify tents and campers, and RVs. I think the idea is to keep those, that, hey, we're talking about things that are smaller sized, as opposed to, a ginormous.
Like event tents.
Roman general's tent.
Yeah.
Well, when you get down to the square footage, you wouldn't allow that anyway, because it says 1,000 square feet, and if you're gonna, and that's gonna be my next question, is that the minimum is 25 foot in width. you divide that into 1,000 square feet, and it only can be 40 feet long. So you can't have a ginormous tent there anyway, because at this point, you can only have a 25 by 40-foot space that comes up to 1,000 square feet.
You can have
My math
bigger.
is correct.
You can have not less than that. The purpose of
That's
these sites, yeah. There
Well,
you go.
true that. And I would like to define what the space is. Is that gonna be a bordered space? I mean, if you're gonna put a number on this at 1,000 square feet, how are you gonna do that?
Well, I understand the
Is this
purpose of this was to
bordered?
allow for emergency, egress, or not to allow the spread of, or to help mitigate the spread of fire by not stacking things so close together. And that's how we came to be on these when it was written into the ordinance. So I don't think that it was arbitrary when it came up originally. I simply pulled it from the commercial one with thinking that inevitably somebody's going to put something in and say personal. We're going to find out they're doing it commercial, and then we're going to go and bring them through the special use permit project. And instead of having them, redesign everything, in theory, they'd already be set for it if they were following the rules. So we're simply piggybacking off of that. But during my discussion with the health department, and Jamie was sitting next to me when we were doing that, my understanding is that's how these came to be, is that these were pulled from a standard that allowed for egress and fire mitigation. So for the particular dimensions, that's why. Certainly, I'm open to other content or changes that you want to suggest.
Okay, so we're saying 2 pad sites for every 5 acres.
Minimal acreage for A1C1. So I thought about this, and let's look at the GIS really quick, because I think it's important when we develop this. Give me just a minute.
Well, if you're gonna do R1 at 10, you could still have an A1 at 3.
Well, let's look at an example really quick. Because we have areas of the county with small lots that are, I don't want to say ideal for camping, but Middle River comes up as a thought. You got conservation over here. You've got small sites that are less than an acre as you go through here. There's a ton of them as you get up in the mountain. And these are ideal for somebody to go and take their camper for the weekend and leave, and they're less than an acre. And we've got other communities like this throughout, throughout the county. They're C1. So,
So, once again, how can you make an R1 be 10 and do that to C1 or A1?
the thought on that is that the spirit of R1 is that it's a residential neighborhood. And so if you had a large parcel, you could fit it in. It was designed for, for everyday living. And while there's certainly a lot of that in A1 and C1 as well, it is, more suited for casual use and recreation than R1 would be intended to be. All of it's up for debate. If you all have opinions, what do you think it should be?
I don't know. I was just trying to go with what's there. And once again, I'm still gonna say that if you're gonna make R1 10 acres, you should almost do the same with C1 and A1.
I knew it would read funny.
I mean, the content, I think we all agree, 10 acres on R1 is appropriate. I think we can start with things we do like and cement those in the document.
Yeah, but if you had an R1, but if you did that, and then you said, okay, well, here's my neighbor, a guy down the street that's got an A1, and he's at 3 acres, and he can do the same thing. But because I'm R1, you're gonna make me be 10 acres.
It's fair. It's a fair question.
Yeah, well, then apply for rezoning.
I mean, depending on the
Take too
parcel,
long.
the Board of Zoning Appeals may be appropriate for something like that. I could deny somebody, or I mean, these are by right things. No one's going to ask me. They're just going to do it. But if I gave them a notice of violation for something, they certainly could go to Board of Zoning Appeals. But, it definitely could be challenged.
I like the idea. I'm an ex-RVer, so I like the idea to begin with. I'm all for it.
Well, sure,
Just
if you
gotta get
had
it
one,
right.
you'd look for an acre in Madison, it'd be a great place.
Yeah.
No, really.
Well, speaking of that, we do want, like you say, the Middle River up there, a lot of those are very small lots, right?
Correct. There's also a lot of folks that own multiple adjacent lots
Yeah,
up
well,
there as
but
well. So
still-
your effective size gets bigger even if your parcel's
I
small.
think the basis of all of this is that we think somebody who has an RV and owns property in Madison should be able to come and set his RV up there for a weekend or something like that as a by right. I want to make sure that we say that. We don't actually say that outright. You go to the maximum of 2 for every 5 acres, which,
All right.
the pad site.
So if you put that in there, Steve, and you put it by right, and it's an acre, and the bylaws for the subdivision says no RVs,
Okay,
Well, you're not going to override what the,
yeah.
yeah, you're not going to override what the private
Yeah.
covenants are of the property or the deed restrictions that are in place.
Yeah.
No,
I'm
none of
probably-
our ordinances
Probably
are gonna do
making
that.
too much out of it, because you're specifically saying pad sites.
I mean, we can
Yeah.
add language that says one minimum, or one allowable by right with no minimum site size in A1C1, or on whatever you want. Because that's probably appropriate, because then it leaves it open the way that it's worded now, whether you need a minimum of 5 or not, because it's worded kind of funny. Mr. Wright was kind enough to point that out, but I did not make the change before we got here. I'd already published.
And then your language of the 30 consecutive days kind of prevents what I think most of us had concern
Yeah.
about, squatting and making a permit.
So I did have a thought about that, and I'm open to feedback. 30 consent, what happens if somebody goes, well, I left last weekend and then I came back? There's no way to enforce that, so it makes it hard anyway. And so if you guys have ideas on other language that could go in there, I'm all ears.
You could combine it with a total for the year or something, no more than
Yeah.
180 days or.
But this,
Kind of reminds me of when I was on K Street, parking on the street. About every 2 hours and move the car so the chalk marks weren't in the same place.
Were you living in your car?
No.
Just kidding.
Sometimes.
Sometime long ago.
yeah.
How are we regulating
Well-
the temporary use of RVs at construction sites? Because isn't there a 6-month window with an extension?
If memory serves, that's exactly right. But so you have 6, I believe I think it's a year when you can reapply up to a second year, and that's as far as it goes. You got to be out after 2 years. So with a temporary permit that I've issued.
Whatever mechanism we're using, I assume that we're using the mechanism of neighbors. And it seems to
Correct.
be a good method.
Oh, they
Is
call.
that it? Oh, yeah, I know. I mean, that's the play.
Yeah.
I mean-
We use the 30 days for a lot of things, so that's in line with short-term rentals and all that stuff.
Is
too.
the planning commission in agreement that if we added language that said that you could use it as a maximum of, pick a number that's excessive, 180 days per year, is that acceptable? Because then, at least then you know that if somebody never leaves and the neighbor complains, it takes 6 months to do a real enforcement action anyway, you at least have something to hang your hat on.
So I used to be part of a group that's down in Virginia Beach, and their bylaws said that you could be there for 3 weeks at a time and 1 week off. And you could come back for 3 weeks and 1 week off. So, and that was just part of the organization. So that's how their bylaws work. So that was just one example to go by.
I mean, no more than 3 weeks at a time, we could certainly put that in there at the
And
pleasure
this
of.
is not for the same person either, the way we're writing it. It's for any particular unit.
Well, and there are provisions for that in the Article 15 or 15A for the campers, where it says that you, well, let's look at it real quick.
See, 180 days, that means Madison cannot be their tax residence.
Gosh. All right, so maybe it needs to be less than that, but I wouldn't, I figured,
Well, is that what you want?
Yeah.
For like 30 days.
And your temporary housing is 12 months, and you can go for a total of 2 years, 24 months total.
Is there any like sanitation regulations?
You got to be right with the health department always.
Right, the pad sites would always have to be, yeah. And actually, with the electricity, doesn't the
So the
building
way,
inspector have to do something with it?
the electricity, oh,
Yeah.
everything's subject to a building permit.
Yeah, okay, so that's implied already,
Correct. And those are most certainly enforced. Article 15-1-6 says, and this is for commercial use, and so it goes on the issuance of permits. But as far as limitations of stay, it says, no permit issued for space rental or occupancy shall exceed 30 days and shall not be renewable to the same party or unit owner until 60 days has elapsed from the expiration date of the original permit. So it would be kind of like Mr. Snyder said, 3 on, 1 off, but in this case, it's 30 days off, 30 days on, 60 days off. So if you were going to keep something in line, you might want to consider something similar to this to include.
Given the time of year, I mean, I personally wouldn't want to have too many days off. Because if you were, just say you were coming at spring and you want to come up there and your friend wants to come up there with you and, or your brother or whoever, and they want to come up here and they want to spend.
You might be
a
up there
couple
every
weeks in their
weekend.
camper.
Yeah.
And it's springtime or summer, you know, and now you're going to say, okay, well, you got to leave for 30 days and it's a great time of year to be there, so.
We're encumbering everybody's property. I don't know if we want to go down that path.
Right.
I tend to agree, it's tough. Because you're right, you might want to be there every weekend, which is in the spirit of what we want to do. You want to come up there on the weekend, but we're just trying to have it to where we don't give people an avenue to live there all the time.
Right.
Are there any other precedent or communities that have like car tags? I mean, I know you don't want to get into the business of having to print off something and put in a placard in the window, but.
That'd be the community that would. do
Right,
that.
yeah, that's, yeah. Yeah, I think just not exceeding 30 consecutive days, don't put a lot of other conditions on it. That should be, you don't want one person to come in and stay a whole month or 6 months. 1 month's okay, but 6 months is not okay.
What
But
about,
if you're there for 30 days and you're off for 1 day, you come right back.
right,
And that's what we get
Yeah.
into for
Go dump
making
the waste and come
enforcement
back.
challenging. I mean, it's challenging now when you have somebody living in their RV, and there's a number of these around that we're dealing with. And, you know, somebody tells you that they leave, you know, that they're not living there full-time. You know, I leave, I just park it here. We end up going for other methods of enforcement. We use the health department for things like that very frequently. They're nice to work with to help remedy those, but nonetheless, it can be tough to prove when somebody's living there and when they're camping there. Oh, I just leave my stuff here and I bring my camper.
It's almost like
You
you
know.
have to write something and hope for the best.
It's unfortunate, but we may have to write something, see where our rub is, and then modify it later, kind of like the boundary line adjustment ordinance we just did. Oh, we found a problem, let's fix it. I mean, I don't recommend throwing caution to the wind, but also, we don't have to decide, I know we've advertised for public hearing, but we were already having a public hearing, so if we need to kick it down the road, we certainly can.
Well, Alan, how many, I guess, what's the number we think we're gonna see? Is it gonna be 100 of these? Is it gonna be 10 of these? Is Mr., what's his name?
Honestly, I don't think anything's going to change than what we see right now. The folks that are using their property to camp are already doing it, and they're going to keep doing it. I mean, as far as me being in the office, the board, you know, the planning commission, and the couple of board members that were there made their intention clear that they feel like you should be able to camp on your property. If you're exchanging, you know, funds for the matter, then, you know, it becomes commercial and it's subject to our ordinance.
So then.
And so unless I catch somebody on Airbnb doing their camper or something like that, I'm not going to do anything with them.
So then verbiage for this, for staff, would probably be best to be an enforcement tool to say, we have it defined, and I can get you for commercial, or I can get you for living in a spot that isn't. Is that kind of how we need to start writing it then, or continue writing it?
It really is that. It's to, if you ended up with another zoning administrator, it would be written in there that we allow camping by, you know, by right, that's okay. No one's going to get another zoning violation. You know, but say just for using their property recreationally, like Mr. Kratz. I understand that's the intention, is that we agree with that. So I don't intend to give anybody else a notice of violation for such a thing. But you know, that's how we got here. So,
As long as it has your teeth to give you a bite to get whoever's breaking the rules, then make sure that's in there.
Yeah,
That's my approach.
I think the key thing here is if you've got somebody that wants to come in 3 or 4 times, 5 times a year, one person, one RV on his property, that certainly should be by right. But when we start getting the pad sites with water and sewer and electricity, then that's when we need to have this coming in.
and I think
and that's what
I
it's
think
doing.
that's quite reasonable. And Mr. Kratz really was the extreme example.
Yeah.
Because he's building something really nice, and it happens to be for himself. I don't think most people are going to go to the extent he went through. I certainly don't think, I think it would be highly unlikely anybody would come in and do more than what he's doing, especially given the expense of doing so. But it could happen. I was glad to learn that the health department requires a permit at 3, because then that also lets me talk to somebody and, you know, refer them to the health department and get to put eyes on something to make sure that everything's okay, and it helps your waste management issue.
Yeah, well, that's good work that you
Yeah.
did on that.
Yeah.
That's very good.
So, I mean, at any rate, if we do nothing, and I find somebody with 3 campsites, and, you know, and I have a reason to be there, I'm not going and looking for problems, but if I have a reason to find somebody and I have 3 campsites, I'm gonna ask the health department if they are aware and have a permit, and if they don't, they're gonna go ahead and talk to them and make sure that they have their waste disposal plan in place and all those things. So with that in mind, it might take care of itself.
Yeah, I think it's starting to look pretty good, actually.
Yeah, I mean, sanitation really my only, like, the main, you know, concern.
Sure.
And that was
But-
his
but-
concern, that's why he put the pads in.
Sure.
Right, exactly, which is actually, it kind of made it look worse, but it was really
It's a good
better.
thing, Yeah.
But I would be inclined to not over-regulate it out of the gate.
Right.
Worst case, you got somebody camping on their own property too much, and then it just gets amended.
They love their property too much.
Sure, exactly. So I mean, it's not like it's gonna be
Um,
dire consequences.
So you don't think they're gonna have the gray water going down the hill like our grandparents did in the
I
farmhouses?
mean, it's still happening.
Yeah.
but, You know, if that's the
may have the
case, you
black water
address
do
it.
it.
Black water too, okay.
So
Okay.
what would you all like me to do with it?
Personally, I think it's starting to look pretty good. I mean, did you say Hannon had some comments to make on it, or?
Yeah, well, I pretty much worked them into what we were
Worked them in,
talking
okay.
about. You have anything else to add? I've got your email you sent me.
Oh, I think that's it.
Okay. So I'm going to make a change based on our conversation that says that for one site, there's no minimum acreage, based on the fact that we've got neighborhoods with less than an acre. But if you're going to have 2 or more, then we'll specify a minimum acreage.
That makes
So something logical.
Is that okay for R1 too?
You tell me.
I think it ought to be actually higher for R1s. I
Well,
like the 10, that made sense.
Yeah.
I don't like to do 10 for R1 if you're gonna do A1 with 3 or such.
Yeah, and
Or
see-
1 possibly.
see, you've got the other side of that. You're gonna tell somebody that's got say, a 3-acre R1, that he can't just, you know, in the summer
Pitch
come
a
and
tent.
park there for, he doesn't have 10 acres. He can't just come there and park in the summer on his R1 property.
So just for sake of argument, well, I guess it doesn't really matter, because any of these things we could rezone at some point. I mean, sure,
Yeah.
if you don't want a minimum acreage for R1,
Well,
then, I mean, that's okay.
the problem with R1 is it goes down to an acre and a half, is that right?
Well, acre and a half's the minimum size you're gonna get in R1.
Yeah. And unlike our A1s,
There's
where you
probably
can have half an
non-conforming.
acre sometimes, so.
Yeah, I'm quite sure that there are non-conforming R1 lots
Yeah.
around that are less than
Yeah.
an acre and a half. But they exist. So, but
think
general
There's
consensus,
some non-conforming A1s.
there's a
Yeah,
lot, there's
lots
a
of
lot of
them, yeah.
non-conforming around in
So-
all the districts.
General consensus is that some kind of limit on the R1 is reasonable.
Okay?
Yeah.
Do we want to move this to public hearing? Are we gonna keep it in there? Or do you want to keep talking about it later?
This is a second work, well, we don't, it's not like we've got a timeline on this. It
That's
hasn't
what I'm
been
saying. We're
advertised,
not
right?
waiting on any action for
Okay.
anybody. We don't have a request except from me writing you a letter to look at it.
Yeah.
So we don't have to do anything if you don't want to. We can look at it next workshop. Or, and if you guys want to think about it a little bit more, I would appreciate if you'd shoot me an email and tell me how you want something worded. It would be quite helpful. We'll go through, we'll pick some options. Maybe we put through a couple of these things and stick them up there and we see which one makes the most sense.
Yeah.
If you and Hannon like it, I'm probably gonna vote yes for it anyway.
I'm quite
You
sure.
guys do your thing, man. You guys
Yeah.
are good at it. So.
Yeah, I really don't think we should limit ourselves to 2 workshops on this kind of thing.
Okay, that's
Amendments.
fair.
Yeah.
I will, I'll take it off the agenda for public hearing, and we'll add another workshop, and we'll keep it going till we find something that we like, or we
Yeah.
get tired of talking about it.
The only other thought is, do we have to define any of the terms, like, what's a campsite?
Right.
And at some point, you just hope that, common sense and normal definitions control.
Kind of like in tax law.
Yeah.
Yep. Like tax law.
So,
Oh.
we're multi-using some of our definitions already on purpose, right? And
Yeah.
we're just saying that this has to be not for compensation.
That's essentially the whole
Yeah.
spirit of the conversation. You can camp for yourself on your own property, but you can't charge a fee for it. If you're
Yeah.
gonna charge a fee, you gotta follow the special use permit provisions. Maybe you put it just like that.
And pay the time.
Yep,
Maybe it only has to be 2 sentences.
sounds good.
You know, I don't think Article 15 here says anything about compensation.
It does. Give me a second here, because we've looked at this. Primitive says for a commercial primitive campground indicating for compensation. And let's see here. And it says for a seasonal travel trailer or camper court. I think that the intent here was clear, or maybe that's how we got here with Kratz. I forgot. What do we got?
Oh, you already hit it for 15A1, talks about commercial.
Yeah. 15A1 says for a commercial primitive campground. But we got here because if Mr. Kratz followed this, and even if it didn't say for compensation, then he would have to follow all of these provisions, including providing a service building.
Yeah.
And we all thought that was excessive.
My comment basically was just saying that if whatever we put in here, we ought to really review Article 15 and make sure we don't, what would be the word?
Muck it up and
Yeah, I mean,
We want to
going through all that without, before you get to 15A, just going through 15, which is not very long, and just make sure that, because there's several things in there.
Yeah, we want to reconcile the 3. Yeah.
Specifically, which things in Article 15 would you like to reconcile with the personal campground definition, just so I know?
Well, I mean, there's one here about, and once again, we don't need to drag this out tonight, it's almost 9 o'clock.
Right.
But, I mean, 15.16, I mean, just talking about, if you're on for 30 days, before you can get another permit, you gotta be 60 days off.
Well, if you own the land and you're camping on your own land, who's issuing a permit? This is about campground owners.
I'm just saying, that's just things to be looking at between the two.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair.
That's all.
Yeah, in that vein, though, your description of the case number itself doesn't anywhere say that not for compensation.
Well, I think where we ran into it was, I think it was the definition in 20-31 for campground
Uh-huh.
has, it accommodates paying guests. And so that's how we got into all of this.
Yeah. Well, my point is, the definition for personal campground, from what we're describing, somewhere in that statement, it should say that this is not for compensation. And right now, it doesn't.
The personal campground says in the first
No, no,
sentence,
I
not in
mean in your
exchange.
case description. If we're going to advertise this.
Not for compensation.
Right.
It's in there.
Exactly.
It's first sentence, not in exchange for rent, lease, or otherwise in
We're
return for
talking about two different
compensation.
things. I'm talking about your case description that's going to be
Oh,
published.
okay.
Yeah,
That I can do.
yes, okay.
Hey, Steve,
Yes.
before we quit, a couple of you had asked what's going on with RSA. I had the administrator write us a letter, you think you want to pass it down?
Oh, thank you.
There it is.
Reported on it.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Elliott.
He's,
I've got about 2 more hours on
right,
personal
he
campground.
says, hopefully as he tries to get us to quit, right?
That's what it's going to end up being.
Thanks, Pete.
Don't have to be tonight.
Okay, we've got a couple hours yet, let's go ahead.
You don't have to go over it tonight, I just wanted
It's never stopped us before.
Never stopped us.
Thanks,
no.
Pete.
Okay. Any other gripes about this case? Okay. All right, Alan, we've got one more thing here on the schedule here, the comprehensive plan workshops.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do need to resume the comprehensive plan workshops. The dates are in your, on the agenda there that are proposed. This gives us time to advertise, pardon me, January 27th, February 3rd, and February 10th. I propose that we do the 2-hour sessions beginning at 6 PM like we were doing previously, or I should at least say sessions not to exceed 2 hours.
Yeah.
And we go from there, be at the pleasure of the Planning Commission.
We do all 3 of those,
Well, let's plan 3 and,
including the day the music died.
yeah.
Sure.
Any significant problems with any of those 3 dates? These are all Mondays, I think. That is right, isn't it? Mondays. They're
Mondays.
yeah. Mhm.
Yes, sir.
January, they're on the agenda, January 27th, February 3rd, February 10th.
Not this coming Monday, but resuming the following. That gives us the chance to advertise appropriately.
Yeah,
That's good.
6 to 8,
It's
beginning
8.
January 27th, the
Tell them.
following 3 Mondays.
6
If-
to 8.
So you want votes tonight?
Yes.
or email?
February 10th, I have a work meeting, just
Okay,
so. I'll check my schedule.
okay. It's our, well, I would say hope, but it's more like a dream. It's our dream that we might not need all 3, but any other
Yeah,
difficulty?
one last comment.
Yeah.
Zach and I were just talking, so he and I both are having the same problem with downloading the package
Oh, okay,
for whatever particular reason. I've got to go through and, everything we get from Mrs. Turner comes through, but, when we get anything that y'all are sending out, we can't download it.
I would encourage you to see our IT guys. They're very customer-friendly and can help you with all of those issues. I mean, really, just stop in and talk to Alan and Bruce, or they'll help you sort out whatever it is.
So there's a difference between the way that y'all are sending out and the way Kimberly's sending it out.
Not that I know of. We post to the website, and because Kim told us how to do
I'm
it.
just making the comment that
That's fine.
we can get Kimberly's, but we can't get y'all's.
Okay. I will ask if you have the latest up-to-date version of Adobe. I'm using the most
I do, 'cause
recent.
I just had it done, remember?
Honestly, it's just it's whenever there's revised one. I can get the first ones, but I don't get revised.
I don't get the first one.
Oh, you
All
get the
right.
first one? Oh.
No, I had to go on the site to get the first one. And all of these since,
So are you talking through your email? You're not getting it?
no, I'm getting the email. When I go to tap to download,
Mm-hmm.
it just doesn't do anything.
To the other members of the Planning Commission, are you all able to download the attachments that we're sending out?
all right. One thing I have noticed, I get a black screen for a while, and then eventually it does download.
They are large documents.
Well, it's not giving any indication that it's doing anything, and then it'll come up, so.
So it's a bad time to say we're going 100% digital here.
Yeah. It gets there
Well, I
eventually.
can get it on the
Yeah.
county website. It downloads it just like that on the county
Wonderful.
website.
That's better than how
And I'm
Outlook
fine
processes
with
it
I'm just-
anyway.
This is just feedback that I'm not getting what y'all are sending, but I can get what Mr. Turner, and I can get stuff from the regular county website.
Okay, as long as you can get it on the county website, that's always the most. We upload to the website directly, you know, because we manage that. And so when the packet's finished, Janet uploads it to the website, and you all get an email that also has it on there, so that way, however you wanted to receive it, it's there. If you can't receive it on one, as long as you can get it on one of them, that's the important bit. But for a specific technical problem, please ask Bruce or Alan, and they can help you look at a setting or whatever it is that's doing it. I'm not sure. I can't help you with the IT stuff. I don't have the ability.
Okay, well, back to the topic. Is there any problem with anybody else for those 3 Mondays? We're okay for those. So we will
It's
schedule
identical.
those.
As long as they're getting it on one of them. It's redundancy.
Nope. All right, Alan, do you want to just say we're through, or you want to tell us about the stuff coming up?
Sure, but say we can talk about the stuff coming up whenever y'all are ready.
Do you all want to hear about what's coming up? Okay, go ahead.
All right, things coming up here. We've got, we had 3 items scheduled for public hearing. We had personal campground definition. Looks like we're going to nix that one and kick that can down the road. We've got public hearing for Ms. Hoffner. I've got the notes of things to get with her on and see if she wants to, we'll work on, well, it's a special use permit, so the board can impose conditions should they choose, but we'll work on drafting some of those that might be suitable for her, the public, and make it easy. Virginia Lawnscapes, public hearing is scheduled. We will hear that one. I don't think I have much of a follow-up. I don't have any follow-up scheduled for Virginia Lawnscapes other than just to touch base with them. Moving on, we've got second workshop for Mr. Heggie. I've got a few things to talk to Mr. Heggie about should he choose to offer proffers. Again, I'm not going to solicit any proffers from Mr. Heggie, much like we talked about with the Kriggersville rezoning. But we may unpack the conversation that you all had and see where your concerns lie and see if he wants to do anything. So there's that. Anabaptist will be second workshop coming up. And that's what I have right now. We have 2 PDRC cases currently scheduled for rezonings to be heard at the beginning of February, so I expect that both of those will be coming before the Planning Commission at the next workshop.
Okay, very good, thank you. Any other items from the Planning Commission? Oh, the public? Any public comment? Can I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Moved and seconded, okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good work, Alan, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
He bought those houses, burned them down.
He already did?
Burned one of them down.
Believe you can burn it down.
The only reason, one he hasn't got is the one that belongs to Mesa. That was Habitat, but somehow or another Mesa got that out of Habitat.
Mesa doesn't
And
own
it's
it
hard.
now.
They don't own it now?
No.
You sure? Look at the deed.
Who, no, my wife's on the board. I know. They don't own it.
In the clerk's office, it says they do.
Really? What are you gonna do?
I had a guy tell me the other day, he went to the clerk's office
He
and looked at it.
needed
said
that one,
Mesa
the one
owned
they
it.
just burned down now.
Well, she didn't know that. I'm gonna tell you that. But I will ask.
David Jones told me that too, 'cause he
This conference is no longer being recorded.
I don't know.
How you get a permit to do that?